inscription.
Perfect. Got it, Avery. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome. You're here to hopefully learn a little bit more about the Phase 2 solicitation for Oregon's Behavioral Health Deflection Program. I wanted to just kick this off with a quick snapshot of the short timeline that we're on. So the Phase 2 funding formula was approved by the Commission just last week on the 21st of October. And so the solicitation was released next day on October 22nd, and counties have 3 weeks to get their budget sheets completed and submitted officially via SM Apply back to the CJC. So that deadline is 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, November 12th. And all of that is with the goal to have the commission make final award decisions at their meeting scheduled for December 16th, 2025. I wanted to review the funding formula a little bit, just to provide some additional details and hopefully answer any questions that you have. But as I mentioned, the commission met last week on October 21st, and they heard our research director talk about all the different formula funding considerations that the CJC had looked at when reviewing county projections and the legislation, House Bill 3069, that kind of created the request to develop this formula. That meeting was really informative and has a lot of different considerations and thoughts from commissioners. So I wanted to point out that it is available on the CJC's YouTube channel, should you be interested in learning more about what the discussion was like and how we arrived at these particular numbers. But per House Bill 3069, the formula had to include the BHD participant projections that were submitted to the CJC by counties. Those are the numbers that you submitted to our research team back in September. And the final formula weights approved by the commission are shown here on this table. Oh yes, Cindy, go ahead.
I was just curious, I was under the impression that they swapped the historic and the projection percentages so that historic was higher than the projection. Did I misunderstand that?
You didn't misunderstand. That was tossed out as an idea by commissioners, but this is indeed where it landed. So after discussion, after going back and forth, and really I think the reason for that was House Bill 3069 really directed kind of this forward thinking in terms of using projections. And so not having that go less than 50%, I think was important to the commission for that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we're looking at this formula weights table, and you'll see that the commission included 5%, that second row, for the county's share of the total projected number of eligible BHD participants for all programs. And then above that, there was 45% weighted for a county's share of the total projected number of enrolled BHD participants for all participating programs. And then the formula, as Cindy mentioned, also included these factors of past performance, those historical enrollment numbers and enrollment rates. So the commission included 40% for a county's share of the total historical number of participants enrolled into BHD programs between January and June of 2025. And then the commission weighted 10% for historic enrollment rates, which is a jurisdiction's percentage of enrolled participants compared to their referrals between January and June of 2025. These historical numbers and rates for enrollment were reported into REDCap by counties. And so that's where those historic numbers came from. And that January to June time period accounts for initial planning in 2024, after the start of the project period for some of those early adopter counties back in April of 2024, all the way through recriminalization on September 1st of 2024, and all of that planning time. the commission acknowledged that there would be some counties come 2025, January through June, may have still been in planning mode. But in order to have some sort of historical look at what these numbers might be, this is the time period that was settled on. And I also wanted to give everyone a reminder that per House Bill 3069, counties produced their own projections based on their own methodologies. There was no prescriptive methodology that everyone had to use. And because of that latitude that folks were allowed as part of this process, there was a wide range for projections that we saw in the data submitted to CJC by counties. And lastly, I wanted to mention that House Bill 3069 incorporates this formula into the future of the BHD program in the 27-29 biennium and those award decisions. So that formula, those approved weights, were then applied to the available phase 2 funding that it's highlighted here for the 27 counties that it applied. So we kind of whittled down from all of Oregon's counties to just the folks that had applied for BHD funding being eligible for this 70% chunk. And then here is the final 25-27 BHD funding table. You can find a copy of this on the CJC's BHD webpage. And the column I want to draw your attention to the most is this rightmost column circled in red. This column is where you're going to find your county's total allocation amount for the 25-27 biennium. We received some early questions already between last week and now about the percentages and allocations not quite adding up to the totals that were displayed here in the rightmost column. And so it's my intention here to kind of walk you through, hopefully in layman's terms, a little bit about what was done here at each step to help you better understand that total amount listed in the rightmost column. So first, your phase 1 formula allocation, which is listed in that third column in the dollar amounts there, may have increased since the last time you saw it. This is because only 27 counties opted in for BHD funding for this 25-27 biennium. The phase 1 funding that remained unallocated after those initial award decisions were made by the commission, that unallocated funding was rerun through that phase 1 formula, which you may remember was the original OAC burn funding formula that we used back in the 24-25 awards. The unallocated funds was rerun using that original OAC burn formula, and then that was applied to the phase 1 allocation amounts. And because of that $150,000 floor that OAC burn funding formula requires, some county awards increased and some remained at that floor amount. So the final phase 1 funding formula allocations are represented in that column, and that is why that number may look different to a few of you. Next, the new phase 2 funding formula using the commission approved weights you saw on that previous slide. That new formula was applied to the available phase 2 funding that we saw on the previous slide in that red circle. So that's 70% chunk. And that was applied to the phase 2 funding using the county provided projections for all the eligible and enrolled participants, as well as the historic enrollment numbers and rates as reported to REDCap. And the phase 2 formula allocations are shown here in that fifth column, so just left to that total award amount. And the last column, or I guess the last step rather, the phase 2 allocation was added to that phase 1 allocation in that third column. And then any counties coming in short were then lifted up to the county funding floor as directed by House Bill 3069 of $300,000 using funds pulled proportionally from counties who came in above that county floor amount. So the grand totals that are displayed here in the rightmost column those are the ones that you will use for your budget projection sheets. Great. And then hopefully this is kind of a less busy view, but here's just another look at those total formula funding allocations for the 25-27 county BHD programs. Right, onto the solicitation. So only counties who submitted a phase 1 application are eligible to submit a phase 2 application. And then only one application may be submitted per entity. And we also wanted to talk about the consortium consortia applications, excuse me. The phase 1 application, if it was submitted by a regional consortium, only the primary applicant of that consortium needs to apply for this phase 2 funding. And lastly, a phase 2 application is not required. So House Bill 3069 states that counties shall not receive less than $300,000 for the 25-27 biennium. But if your total allocation came in above that funding floor and your county does not need all or part of that additional allocation, you are not required to apply for it. An important note, though, is that any part of an applicant's total formula allocation that is not requested as part of this budget projection sheet will be forfeited by that applicant. So this means that if your county's grand total allocation came in at $500,000 and the total amount you request on your budget projection sheet you submit to the CJC comes in at $480,000, your county is choosing to forfeit that remaining $20,000, and staff will not reach out to you if your budget projection sheet total is less than your total formula allocation. That is up to you all. Yes, Avery.
Thanks, Casey. And I just wanted to reiterate that if you do want to apply for only part of those additional funds, you will need to apply. It's just if you do not want to apply for any of the additional funds, that you would not need to apply as part of phase 2.
Thanks for that clarification, Avery. All right, so for the phase 2 application, there are only 2 components. First, we ask that you indicate a primary contact for any questions or clarifications. This is the person to whom staff will reach out with questions or clarifications during our review process. And we've got a pretty tight turnaround for that staff review process. So we really are hoping it's the person that we need to talk to about the budget sheet. And then second, we are requiring a complete budget projection sheet that reflects the county's 25-27 BHD program proposal that was previously approved as part of phase 1, and that total award amount in the rightmost column of the formula funding table. So with that budget projection sheet, it must be complete, including all line item narratives. It must be in its original formatting as downloaded from the CJC's website, and it must not exceed your county's total allocation in the rightmost column on the formula funding table. You may not request more than what is your county's formula funding allocation. It also must represent your county's approved program proposal for the 25-27 biennium that was approved as part of the phase 1 process. As part of this budget projection sheet, you may include any previously approved line items from your phase 1 approved budget sheet, and you can adjust those units to meet your needs for the full biennium. So if you had submitted a, certain amount of FTE for a staff member, you can now bring that up to the FTE you need. Or maybe it was a staff member that you had requested only a handful of months. Now you can request the full project period. You may also drop any line item from your phase 1 budget if your jurisdiction has reassessed what it needs to achieve your approved program proposal goals. You may also include any new line item that is within the scope of your approved program proposal. So this is not the time to add on a whole bunch of new stuff that you have thought about in the past month, this is the time to show the commission what exact allocations of money you need and where they need to go to what budget categories to do the efforts that you outlined in your approved program proposal. The first opportunity you will have to submit a adjustment request. For instance, if you're dropping an approved pathway, or if you are, moving around funds to better suit your needs in that regard, that will be open in the future in January, I believe is the first one. But now is kind of the time to show what you are doing with a total award allocation that is highlighted for your county in that rightmost column on the funding table, and how those funds will support your approved program activities as part of your program proposal for phase one. So as far as the don'ts, as part of this process, you may not exceed your county's total formula allocation. So we cannot accept any request that is above total amount listed for your county in that rightmost column on the funding table. You may not include new line items that are not within scope of your previously approved program proposal. So again, it's not the time to add on stuff that was not outlined in your program proposal. You may not exceed the project period. So the project period for this biennium's BHD grant is July 1st of 2025 through August 31st of 2027. If you are requesting a staff person to, go beyond that total number of months, we will be reaching out to you to have you adjust that. You may not use any version of the budget projection sheet besides the one that was available for this phase 2 application. That's available on our website as well as linked in the application. And you may not alter the budget projection sheet in any way except to input values into unlocked fields. And we want to, take a second here to recognize that your program proposal was submitted to the CJC before you knew what the funding situation looked like, and before we could even know what the funding situation looked like. Now we know, and at this time, you may not change your program proposal. But if the funding amount has affected your program's ability to operationalize your program proposal, you can request those adjustments to your project as a whole in future quarterly reporting open adjustments. And such an adjustment, because it would be, your program changing significantly, would need to go before the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission for decision. But if there are certain line items that, you assess that you do not have the funds to do now, and, maybe you had an idea to do active outreach and you had, 7 or 8 efforts that were going to be dedicated to that active outreach, and you need to pare it back now to maybe 3 or 4 of those efforts. That's still, part of your program proposal. You're attempting to do active outreach as you set out, and that is totally okay. And then I wanted to kind of review what to expect as part of this application process. So a recording of this informational session will be available online at the CJC's BHD webpage. And just a reminder, the submissions of this phase 2 application are due by 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, November 12th, 2025. We will then review budgets for all eligible expenses and conduct any necessary outreach to counties for clarifications or questions. And then we will be sending those budgets and its details to commissioners in advance of the December commission meeting. Those final award decisions they're set to be made at the December 16th commission meeting. So are there any questions that I can answer from you all? Yeah, Cindy, go ahead.
The only question I have is on the funding formula table.
Mm-hmm.
The dollar amounts I get, I don't understand that Formula 1 percentage. Our first phase formula was 6.56%, and now it says 0.39. What is that percentage of?
Okay, I'm just trying to think here. Avery, do you have any insight into that? So I know that the phase one percentages, they don't add up to 100%. Like that first phase one funding formula column. And I think it may be, but Avery, correct me if I'm wrong, it may be that slice of the pie out of all the available funding. So phase one and phase two. Is that correct, Avery?
That might be something that we should connect one-on-one about. I'll need to go back to the phase one formula funding table to take a look at that.
Okay. I know that there was some helpful additional information on the formula funding table that's actually published online as well, kind of in those asterisks subtext.
Yeah, and I've read those. I think what's really confusing me is like ours is 0.39. Our dollar amount makes sense, but then there's others who have a much higher percentage but lower dollar amounts. I couldn't figure out, and I had a question from our governance committee, and I just don't know. I was like, just rest assured, I know our dollar amounts are right. I have no idea why that percentage changed.
Okay, yeah. Well, I appreciate you pointing that out, and we will get back to you. And if it's something that we need to update everyone on, we're happy to do so. Obviously, we're human too, so it's possible,
Right.
there is a mistake there. I can assure everyone, though, that at least the rightmost column that is the most important is indeed that award amount, or that allocation amount. So, yeah, I think that this is, a tough line for us to walk in terms of we want to be as like transparent as possible, and there's also so much math that goes on behind the scenes, and without getting our accounting department down to sit everyone down with a whiteboard and walk us through. We want to be able to share all the steps, and also it may have just been more simple if we just showed you the grand total. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Cindy, and we will get back to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks? Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys joining, and we will be sure to share a recording of this for all the folks who were not able to join today. And if additional questions come up, feel free to email us. But thank you, and I hope you have a great week.